Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. The presidents of Serbia and Kosovo say they support land swaps as a path towards a new dawn in relations, but the proposal is dividing opinion.
I'm Malika Bilal. Today we'll ask whether changing the borders within the Western Balkans will promote peace or deepen divisions. Send us your comments via Twitter and our live YouTube chat.
Kosovo is recognised as a state by 116 countries, but neighbouring Serbia still considers it to be a rebel province that first broke away during a war 2 decades ago. Now, President Hashim Thaci of Kosovo says that there is, I'm going to quote him here, a good window of opportunity, end of quote, to reach a final deal with Serbia as the idea of land swaps gains support.
Thaci and his Serbian counterpart, Aleksandar Vučić, first put on a united front for altering the country's borders in August. The precise outline of a land swap has not been laid out, but analysts say Serbia could absorb parts of northern Kosovo, home to a majority Serbian population. Kosovo could receive parts of Serbia's Presevo Valley, which is largely populated by ethnic Albanians.
The suggestion that land swaps could be part of a final deal between Kosovo and Serbia has sparked some fierce debate. Some observers say they could reduce tensions and put both Serbia and Kosovo on the path towards EU membership. But for many people, land swaps are not the answer. In late September, thousands of Kosovars protested against the very idea of changing the borders of their country.
To discuss this further, we're joined by Florian Bieber. He's a professor of political science whose work focuses on southeastern Europe. He joins us from Graz, Austria. Jelena Milic is director of the Center for Euro-Atlantic Studies. She joins us from Serbia's capital, Belgrade.
And from the Kosovo capital, Pristina, we have Argon Meleci. He is an activist and policy analyst. It's good to have you here, everybody. Florian, I'm just thinking back to that map that we showed at the beginning of the programme. It seems a little bit extreme for two countries whose borders have been quite set for some time to be thinking about giving a bit of this back, taking a bit of this. What is behind it?
Well, it's got a lot to do with the fact that both countries haven't established normal diplomatic relations. Serbia refuses to recognize Kosovo and has long claimed in its constitution that Kosovo is a part of Serbia. So there's an open question, and the real question is how to resolve it. To resolve it through border changes or something else. It's clear the message has been from the European Union that they need to resolve the differences. They have to have some terms in which they recognize one another so that both of them can join the European Union. So at the end of the day, it's actually about both being in the EU and both having no border between each other. That's in a certain way the irony of the whole debate.
Argon, I'm just thinking about, as we had another look at that map there, how easy is it to go from Kosovo into Serbia, from Serbia into Kosovo, bearing in mind that the end of acrimonious relationship, that hasn't happened yet?
Well, there has been, in terms of freedom of movement, improvement, because there's been a dialogue over the past 3 years facilitated by the EU. As a Kosovar, you can go to Serbia, or Serbia can move freely into Kosovo. The problem is that this idea of border changes now comes at the, Florian explained the context right. It's part of this process of joining the EU. The EU wants countries that want to join it to resolve these bilateral disputes. And why this is happening now is because there's been this artificial kind of deadline set that 2019 should be maybe a kind of date where a final, comprehensive solutions should be reached. And the challenge is that this is not a preferred option for Kosovo, this land swap, and it does not enjoy, and recent polling has shown that this does not enjoy wide support, but it's kind of has been imposed, or at least a part of the political elite, especially President Thaci, has kind of embraced it, because Kosovo, the expectation from the West and from parts of the EU is that Kosovo should make some sort of compromise for Serbia to recognize it within these borders. And it's very difficult for Kosovo to sort of come up with any more concessions, more than it has given. By that I mean giving more rights to Kosovo Serbs. So now, with Kosovo not having any more to give, we've come to this idea of, maybe exchanging territories, and this is actually an idea that is preferred by Serbia. And the key difference in why this has become now acceptable is the shifts in the international community. Until now, borders have been any talk of borders has been strongly discouraged. Borders in the Balkans have been perceived and conceived as as set, and that countries should resolve any kind of minority issues within these existing borders. But now there's been a bit of a shift in the international community, especially in terms of the U.S. position on this. So this difference in opinion, or so this more openness of the U.S. towards this issue, has impacted the way some people in Kosovo, especially President Taci, sees this and sees it as one of the ways of how to possibly resolve this, making it sound like a magic bullet, but we still don't know what we're actually talking about.
So Agan, I'm glad that you brought that up. You actually raised several interesting points there that several of our community members are echoing. I wanted to pause on just one, because you gave us the view from Kosovo. I wanted to share the view from Belgrade. This is someone who tweets in that the main discussion is about territory, but what we should talk about is people and how to ensure that Albanians and Serbs live in a society in which it's guaranteed the rule of law, security, access to justice, freedom of movement and speech, respect of human and minority rights, and job opportunities. So, Jelena, I want to go to you with that, coming to us from Belgrade. Are these things that citizens are not accessing right now on either side, in Serbia or in Kosovo?
Well, first of all, a few comments. I think it is fair to notice that actually 5 EU member states, 4 of them are also NATO member states, haven't recognized Kosovo as well. And it is not merely a bilateral dispute between Serbia and its province which rightfully declared independence, as many pundits and commentators and frankly diplomats want to present. We are talking about pretty unique case. Serbia has been punished, with good reason by NATO intervention back in 1999. For mass violation of human rights and ongoing humanitarian crisis and killing of civilians. But then to strip the part of a territory as well is a pretty unique case. And it is not a bilateral dispute. It is full-fledged multilateral dispute, bearing in mind that there are member states of the Security Council who are also not recognizing Kosovo. But yes, in a way, what we are trying, I think, in a good faith to find is an acceptable, feasible, peaceful agreement between Serbia and Kosovo that can keep both countries or territories on the EU path. And since the formal dialogue between Belgrade and Kosovo started 5 years ago, none has changed with regard to the recognition of the 5 EU member states that still haven't recognized Kosovo. And it is not that all the commitments have been met by both sides. For example, the Association of Municipalities of Serbia hasn't been set up, etc., etc. So adjustment of administrative line between Kosovo and Serbia is actually not a final goal as such. It is just one of the tools in an effort to find more comprehensive, durable, acceptable solution, which of course should include all other things. But it is not fair to narrow it down, as this Twitter person just did, to just some kind of a wish and demand for the territory. These 4 municipalities actually are where some of the key strategic resources are located,
so Jelena,
which both sides have an interest for. So this is actually part of most pragmatical approach, if you ask me, in 2018.
Okay, so Jelena, obviously there's a political conversation happening at a certain level, but there are also people who are living either in Serbia or Kosovo trying to work out what might happen to them if they're in these areas that are being discussed. So, early on, hold tight for a moment, because I actually want to hear from some of those people. So in September, in the Serbian town of Presevo, we talked to an Albanian and a Serbian about the prospect of them being not in Serbia anymore, but being in Kosovo. This is what they told us.
Joining Kosovo would mean free trade, because here there is massive unemployment and there is no future. That's why young people are leaving.
But what if there's a conflict, God forbid? A conflict brings the greatest damage to all. We should by no means give away what isn't meant as a gift.
Florian, what I'm not clear about is what is the actual plan? How does this actually happen? Or will it even happen? Is it just talk at a political level that will never actually happen?
I mean, I think that we don't know that, and that's part of the problem. Nobody knows the details of such an idea. I mean, Jelena is one of the people from think tank scene who's been advocating it or has been suggesting these border changes. But from the official politics, we haven't had any clear kind of outline what this would look like and also how to deal with it. Because as we just saw in this little report, I mean, there are Serbs living in Presevo and Bojanovac, the towns which I talked about. Where would they end up? They certainly would be rather unhappy to be all of a sudden Kosovo citizens. But also, we've got to keep in mind that a significant share of Serbs do not live in the north of Kosovo. They live in the central parts of Kosovo, which could not join Serbia, and they would find themselves in a more vulnerable position. You find some of the most vocal critics of the idea of border changes among those Serbs from towns like Gračanica or Štrbce or other villages and communities across Kosovo who could not hope to be or anticipate to be part of Serbia. So there's a degree of uncertainty. And I think that's partly one of the dangers of such a plan, that it creates more anxiety. And I fully agree with Jelena that, of course, the goal is rule of law. The goal is at a certain way moving both countries forward. But the question is whether this change of borders, and I think we shouldn't call it correction of administrative borders and anything like that. I mean, I was told there's a joke in Kosovo nowadays. How do you call a haircut? You call it a hair correction, because people start using the term correction for border changes. It's a border change, and that's a fairly significant one. It will affect several tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people, and that creates a lot of difficulties, and we have to be very clear about the potential risks and dangers of it. And I think those who've been advocating it or putting it on the agenda have not been mapping this out. And at the end, it's talk about territories. It is a talk about territories, and once territories on the agenda, it gets to be very difficult to focus on issues of rule of law, on democracy, and on human rights. And I feel like this debate has sidelined this, what really matters for most citizens. It is about jobs, it's about predictable governments, and neither side, neither Kosovo nor Serbia is really offering it for most of its citizens at the moment. And I don't believe that a border changes would offer a better path towards that. And I think that that is one of the risks, that the agenda gets hijacked by a nationalist debate for the territory I get, the other side doesn't get. So it's a zero-sum game of losers and winners.
And Florian, adding to that uncertainty and that anxiety that you talked about is a tweet like this. This is Yimbo, who says, this will all depend on the population living on the said lands for swapping. For it to work, there must be 100% agreement between both the government and the population. However, there doesn't look like there is. This is a tweet we got from Puns and Roses, who says, hopefully you will make it clear on this show, the Kosovo-Serbia territory swap is opposed by 77% of Kosovo's citizens. And despite this, the EU and the US are trying to sell it as a will of the people idea. So that 77% stat comes from a poll done in September by the Kosovo Democratic Institute. You can see it here, and we can also tweet it out for you. Would you accept the exchange of territory between Kosovo and Serbia as part of the normalization agreement between the parties? And you see it there. The no is pretty overwhelming, Agon. What are people saying?
Yes, but there's a caveat to this, because, as Florian also mentioned, we still don't know what is being exchanged and what are the other aspects of this agreement, because this will not only be an exchange, also include other parts like Kosovo joining the UN. We still don't know what will happen to the rights that Serbs have currently within Kosovo. So this idea is still very vague and very clear. So people's opinion so far about it is mostly based on a sort of a personal rejection of the person who has proposed it, and that's President Taci, who has lost considerable trust in the political scene. Now, I think when we're talking about human voice, like the voices of the actual people and those who will be affected, we should definitely be worried about those who are in these affected areas. But there is another part of the population that is deeply affected by this, and this is one of the reasons why there is a sense of a rush to have an agreement. And these are the other 90% living in the other parts of the country, both in Serbia and in Kosovo, who are in a way stuck as hostage
My
of
words,
this.
exactly.
stuck as hostage of this the continuing of this limbo and of this Kosovo-Serbia issue not being resolved is empowering. There's the flip side of this. It's empowering nationalists. It's allowing a political elite to sort of securitize the issue and sort of and then rule by sort of being the more patriotic on this issue. It's hampering democratization in Kosovo. It has really damaged our state building process. It has damaged reconciliation because, for example, in Kosovo, the minority is still seen a little bit as a threat, as sort of being representing Serbia and not actually being, a minority. And it's also damaging this whole security architecture for the whole region. So my concern is, and what some people who might be a little bit more pragmatic on the solution right now, is that this is definitely a horrible deal with a lot of risks, but is it really worse than the status quo? Or this continuation of this limbo?
Hold tight for there for a moment, because that's a really good point to put to Jelena. Jelena.
Oh, I tend to agree with my colleague from Kosovo. People like Petri Selimi or I are also citizens of these territories, and we have a right to voice what we see is the best future for most of us. Yes, it is complicated. Maybe it's going to be complicated for some individuals who are living along the administrative line, and it is still an administrative line because Serbia hasn't recognized Kosovo, like 5 EU member states, for example. But speaking about risks, ever since this idea became a mainstream topic, nothing happened. No significant security threats, challenges, God forbid, exodus, as pundits and individuals who are not representing many people like Ms. Rada Trajković or Sava Janić are claiming. Speaking about the change, even if you want border, 2008, when Kosovo unilaterally declared independence, was also the change of type of the border for many, even those living south of Ibar, in poor municipalities. And still nothing significant in terms of security happened. So we are not talking big security risks, as some pundits and former diplomats are talking about. As we speak today, huge NATO-Serbia civilian exercise with 2,000 troops is going. Secretary General of NATO and President Vučić had excellent press conference announcing on both sides improvement of cooperation between Serbia and NATO, etc., etc. Sometimes Mr. Bieber, for example, launched this term of stabilocracy as a way of criticizing the EU for favoring stability over democracy. But what we hear from these same pundits now is that actually they are championing stability in terms of perceptions of what region was back in 90s, not acknowledging all the improvements and reality of 2018, including the fact that Croatia, Albania, Montenegro are now member states of NATO. Even Romania and Bulgaria were not member states of NATO in the period when first initial dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia started. Now they are full-fledged NATO members, etc., etc. So
Jelena, I hear what you're saying. I want to pause you for a moment because I want to bring in two members of our community. Can
I at least get the same amount of time?
I do believe you did. If we're actually keeping score, I do believe you did. But what I want to bring in is someone who actually reiterates some of what you are saying, and they're in a back and forth with someone else online. So this first person is Ilya. He says, I believe this land swap will open a Pandora's box in the region. The predominantly Serb entity in Bosnia will then want to move closer to Serbia. Ethnic Albanians in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia will want to join with Kosovo. Now, the person who has your point of view writes in this is Janet Serbia, who says the Pandora's box was opened with the recognition of Kosovo, a Serbian province. Why? Because it was a unilateral decision against the Serbian constitution, international law, and the UN resolution. And unlike that, the land swap would be a deal between sides involved, but not with those parties. So Florian, I want to go to you with this argument here and this idea of a Pandora's box being opened for future conflict.
I mean, I would be skeptical in the sense that we're not going to see a tremendous change overnight if we would have the border changes between Serbia and Kosovo. First of all, they would have to be bilaterally agreed, and that's quite different from a unilateral claim to change borders. So I would not be the one who says, Pandora's Box means border changes tomorrow. But it's certainly, the message is we want ethnic borders. And I think, Jelena, I would really, kind of push you on that, saying that, fundamentally, I'm not saying that there should be stability at the price of democracy. But what I'm rather saying is that aren't we, by letting the borders follow ethnic lines, and this is what this is fundamentally about. Aren't we fundamentally? Can I just finish my sentence, Jelena? But by fundamentally giving an encouragement. But let me just finish the sentence. We're fundamentally encouraging that other nationalist parties will try to change the borders along ethnic lines, because we're saying this is possible and this is legitimate. And this is something which I think, not immediately, but in the long term, will encourage exactly the wrong political forces and will be destabilizing for multi-ethnic states like Bosnia, like Macedonia and others.
Jelena, can I just add something else that I saw? And this is not a pundit. I know you're talking a lot about pundits today, but this is from Kosovo's Prime Minister, Ramesh Haradinaj. Have a look here on my laptop. This is an interview that he did quite recently with the Irish Times. He says that this idea of changing the borders, it would mean war. If we reopen what has already been agreed, it means reopening the past. And in our region, reopening the past means reopening wars. All these borders are the result of tragic wars. That is the Prime Minister of Kosovo, who is not in line with the President of Kosovo there. So even debate amongst Kosovars.
An embarrassing threat that should be actually responded to. We don't have that kind of claims coming from Serbia. But please let me, if you ask me so many questions, let me just answer some of them. First of all, it is not ethnic partition by ethnic line. It is just the least bad feasible option. As we speak, there is no even reason to write to Federica Mogherini and claim that we are going along the line of creation of monoethnic states. Because as we speak, in Serbia, there are ongoing process of election of national councils of ethnic minorities. And there is 21 of them. Hungarians are in the government. Bosniaks from Sandžak have been participating in the Serbian government. We don't hear any other of the cranes of this drama queen approaches that Balkans are just going to fall apart. And again, as we said, there is an increased cooperation between Serbia and NATO. Just to mention one thing, contrary to 90s, the entire region is in the process of the EU integration. There are cooperations under the RCC, Regional Cooperation Council, of the Chief of Staffs of all the member states of the region, including Kosovo. There is Adriatic Charter, etc., etc. Serbia is having individual partnership action plan with NATO. So I don't know who is going to trigger and to start this war. I frankly would like if the international journalists would ask Mr. Haradinaj on that, because he is just echoing some of these pretty obsolete and old school trends with small risks. If properly addressed, they can totally contain. We are actually possibly gaining a lot. Serbia getting closer to the United States and NATO.
Okay.
And
Jelena, I have 1 minute left. So I'm going to wrap you up. Jelena, thank you. I'm going to wrap you up for a moment. Earlier, you heard from people in Serbia talking about maybe being incorporated into Kosovo. I want you to hear from people in Kosovo who may well be incorporated into Serbia. And you'll hear from, in just a second, from a Serbian and an Albanian. So again, the thoughts down on the ground. Have a listen.
I don't know what will happen with Serbs south of here. In that case, the division is between Serbs and them. Unfortunately, that is bad.
Changing the borders, I believe, is dangerous. It is best for Kosovo to insist on preserving its borders. I would like for Presevo, Medveđa, and Bojanović to be a part of Kosovo. But I don't believe that Serbia would give away all of this.
So a lot of skepticism there here as well. This is via YouTube. Legendary writes in, there are no benefits. And as soon as you start demanding land and switching it about, conflict happens and war follows.
Thank you to our guests, Florian, Jelena, Argon. Of course, this show is not long enough to have this discussion. I'm going to take you all online at AJ Stream, to be continued. Thank you very much for taking part. Malika and I will see you online. See you next time.